Marcus Hayes had studied Eleanor Whitmore for 3 months before making his move. 62 years old, widow of tech mogul Richard Whitmore, worth an estimated $40 million, and utterly alone. The research was meticulous. He knew her morning routine, her favorite charity events, even the coffee shop where she lingered on Thursday afternoons. Marcus had perfected this approach over the years, though never with a target quite this wealthy. At 35, he possessed the kind of easy charm that made people trust him, a smile that seemed genuine, and just enough vulnerability in his backstory to inspire sympathy. He'd practiced the script until it felt natural. The key was patience, he reminded himself. Women like Eleanor needed to believe they'd discovered him, not the other way around. He watched her now through the window of the coffee shop, noting the designer handbag, the subtle jewelry that whispered of old money rather than screaming it. Perfect. She sat alone reading a book, occasionally glancing up with an expression Marcus recognized, loneliness wrapped in dignity. Her silver hair was styled impeccably, her posture elegant despite the emptiness in her eyes. This was the moment. Marcus took a breath, arranged his features into an expression of distracted contemplation, and walked into the cafe. He ordered his coffee, then turned as if noticing her for the first time. Their eyes met. She offered a polite smile. He smiled back, warm, but not aggressive. Then he deliberately turned away, giving her space. The art of seduction, he'd learned, began with restraint. The accidental encounters continued with calculated precision. Marcus appeared at the art gallery opening Eleanor attended, expressing thoughtful opinions about a sculpture she'd been admiring. A week later, at the botanical gardens she frequented, he was sketching near her favorite bench. Each interaction was brief, pleasant, utterly coincidental. He never pushed, never asked for her number, simply existed in her orbit until curiosity became interest. Eleanor began to initiate conversations, asking about his sketches, his thoughts on the exhibition. Marcus revealed himself in carefully measured doses. He was an aspiring architect who'd left a corporate job to pursue meaningful work, struggling but hopeful, recently moved to the city to start fresh after a difficult divorce. All lies, of course, but delivered with such earnest vulnerability that Eleanor's expression softened each time they spoke. She mentioned, almost shyly, a lecture series at the museum she thought he might enjoy. Marcus's face lit up with genuine-seeming delight. By the end of their 4th chance meeting, Eleanor invited him to coffee intentionally. Over lattes, she asked about his life with the kind of attentive interest that came from years of loneliness. Marcus shared his fabricated struggles, the modest apartment, the freelance work that barely covered expenses, the dream of designing buildings that mattered. Eleanor listened with an intensity that made him almost uncomfortable. When she reached across the table to gently touch his hand, offering encouragement, Marcus felt a flicker of something unexpected. Guilt, perhaps. He suppressed it quickly. This was business, nothing personal. Their relationship progressed exactly as Marcus had planned. Dinners at restaurants Eleanor chose, always elegant but not ostentatious. Walks through the city where she pointed out architectural details he pretended to find fascinating. She was remarkably cultured, he had to admit, and occasionally said something genuinely interesting. Marcus played his role perfectly, attentive but not fawning, ambitious but humble, attracted to her mind and spirit rather than her obvious wealth. He never asked for anything, which made Eleanor increasingly generous. She invited him to gallery openings, introduced him to her small circle of friends as a brilliant young architect. Marcus noticed how her face brightened when he entered a room, how she'd begun dressing with extra care before their meetings. The loneliness in her eyes was gradually being replaced by something else. Hope, maybe. It made his job easier, and, paradoxically, harder. 6 weeks into their courtship, Eleanor kissed him. They were in her penthouse, overlooking the glittering city after an evening at the symphony. Marcus had expected this moment, prepared for it, yet something in the tentative way she approached him created an unwelcome tightness in his chest. He returned the kiss with practiced passion, feeling her relax into his arms. Later, lying beside her in the enormous bed that had clearly been shared with only one other person for decades, Marcus stared at the ceiling. Eleanor slept peacefully, her hand resting on his chest. $40 million, he reminded himself. This was the endgame. The uncomfortable feeling would pass. The proposal came from Marcus 3 months later, delivered with apparent spontaneity during a weekend at Eleanor's lake house. He'd orchestrated the moment carefully. Sunset over the water, champagne, a heartfelt speech about finding love when he'd stopped looking for it. The ring was modest by her standards, which he explained as wanting to give her something he'd saved for himself, rather than something her money could buy. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she said yes. The wedding was small, Eleanor's preference. A handful of her friends, none of Marcus's invented family, who were conveniently overseas. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, watched Marcus throughout the ceremony with unconcealed suspicion. He made sure to be especially attentive to Eleanor under that scrutiny, kissing her hand, whispering endearments. Patricia pulled Eleanor aside before the reception. Marcus watched them talk, saw Eleanor shake her head firmly, place a hand on Patricia's arm in reassurance. Whatever warnings the lawyer had offered, Eleanor had dismissed them. Love, Marcus knew, made people foolish. The reception was elegant and brief. Eleanor seemed genuinely happy, radiant even, in a simple cream-colored dress. When they danced, she looked up at him with such open affection that Marcus had to remind himself this was a performance. Just a performance. That night, in the penthouse that was now legally half his, Marcus allowed himself a moment of triumph. He'd done it. Now came the waiting game. Eleanor was healthy for her age, but she was still 62. Time was on his side. What Marcus didn't know was that Eleanor had recognized him the very first day in the coffee shop. Not Marcus Hayes specifically, but the type. She'd seen the practiced glances, the two perfect coincidences, the carefully crafted vulnerability. Richard had taught her many things during their 30-year marriage, including how to spot a con. She'd had Marcus investigated within a week. The real Marcus Hayes was a small-time grifter with a pattern. Lonely, wealthy women, whirlwind romances, suspiciously timed inheritances, or generous gifts before he disappeared. He'd never actually married any of them before, which made Eleanor something of a special case. The question was why. Patricia had urged her to confront him, to have him arrested. But Eleanor had made a different choice. She decided to marry him anyway. Not because she was foolish or desperate, but because she was dying. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe 8. Pancreatic cancer, aggressive and inoperable. She could spend her final months alone, bitter about the young man trying to scam her, or she could do something interesting. Eleanor Whitmore had built a fortune through calculated risks and understanding human nature. This would be her final gamble. She would give Marcus exactly what he wanted: her money, her death, her entire estate. But with conditions he wouldn't discover until it was too late. Conditions that might, if she'd read him correctly, change everything. It was audacious, possibly foolish, but Eleanor was done playing it safe. The first month of marriage was easier than Marcus expected. Eleanor made no demands, asked for nothing except his company. They fell into a comfortable routine, breakfasts together, evenings at home, or quiet dinners out. She seemed content simply having him near, which suited Marcus fine. He played the devoted husband, attentive and affectionate, while mentally calculating timelines and inheritance laws. Eleanor's health seemed robust. This might take longer than he'd hoped. Then one morning, Marcus found Eleanor in the kitchen, gripping the counter, her face pale. She waved off his concern, claiming it was just a dizzy spell, but he noticed she'd lost weight, that her clothes hung a bit looser. Over the following weeks, there were more incidents. Eleanor tired easily, sometimes excused herself from events early. Marcus felt a strange mixture of anticipation and something he refused to name. The end game was approaching faster than expected. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, he felt unsettled. Eleanor never complained, never showed fear. She faced whatever was happening with quiet dignity that Marcus found himself reluctantly admiring. Patricia Chen visited more frequently, spending long hours with Eleanor in her study. Marcus tried to listen at doors, but caught only fragments, legal terms, document signing, Eleanor's calm voice giving instructions. He wondered if she was updating her will, hopefully in his favor. When he asked Eleanor about the meetings, she simply smiled and said she was organizing her affairs. "Just being practical," she said, touching his cheek with unexpected tenderness. 3 months into their marriage, Eleanor collapsed. Marcus called the ambulance, rode with her to the hospital, played the terrified husband with an ease that surprised him. It wasn't entirely an act. When the doctor delivered the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, weeks to live at most, Marcus felt the world tilt. Eleanor had been dying all along. She took the news with remarkable composure, thanking the doctor calmly. Marcus sat stunned, processing implications. Weeks, not months or years. His careful plan had suddenly become very real, very immediate. That night, sitting beside Eleanor's hospital bed, Marcus studied her sleeping face. She looked peaceful, almost serene. How long had she known? The weight loss, the fatigue, these hadn't been sudden developments. She must have known before they married, maybe even before they met. The realization hit him like cold water. She'd known she was dying, known what he was, and married him anyway. But why? The question gnawed at him. Eleanor stirred, opened her eyes, and found him watching her. She smiled, that gentle smile that had begun to undo something in his chest. "You should go home and rest, Marcus," she whispered. "I'm fine here." But he didn't leave. For the first time in their entire relationship, Marcus made a choice that wasn't calculated or strategic. He pulled the uncomfortable hospital chair closer to her bed and took her hand. "I'm staying," he said, and meant it. Eleanor came home with hospice care, her penthouse transformed into a peaceful space for dying. Marcus found himself becoming her primary caregiver, a role he'd never imagined playing. He brought her medication on schedule, sat with her during the bad hours, read to her when she was too weak to hold a book. The nurses praised his devotion. Patricia Chen watched him with those sharp eyes, still suspicious but perhaps slightly less hostile. Eleanor seemed at peace, grateful for his presence in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. She talked sometimes about her life, about Richard, about the years of loneliness after his death. "I forgot what it felt like to have someone to share mornings with," she said one afternoon, her hand in his. "Thank you for giving that back to me." Marcus opened his mouth to deliver some practiced endearment and found he couldn't. The words that came out instead were raw and unplanned. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." She looked at him with those knowing eyes, and he realized she already knew, had always known. "About why you married me?" she asked gently. Marcus nodded, shame flooding through him for the first time in his adult life. Eleanor squeezed his hand weakly. "I know, Marcus. I've always known." The confession he'd planned to make died in his throat. She knew, had known from the beginning, and married him anyway. "Why?" he whispered. "Why would you do that?" Eleanor smiled. That mysterious smile he'd learned meant she was about to say something important. "Because I saw something in you that you don't see in yourself." Patricia Chen arrived the next morning with documents. Eleanor asked Marcus to stay as she explained her final wishes. The estate, all $40 million, would indeed go to Marcus, but with conditions. He would receive monthly disbursements of $50,000 for living expenses. The rest would be held in trust, accessible only for specific purposes: education, business investments that created jobs, charitable work. If Marcus wanted the full inheritance, he had 5 years to prove he could build something meaningful with it. Not just wealth, but purpose. After 5 years, if he'd met the conditions Patricia outlined, everything would be his unrestricted. If not, the estate would go to Eleanor's chosen charities. Marcus stared at the documents, understanding flooding through him. This was her gamble, her test. She'd given him the money but forced him to become someone worthy of it. "You can refuse," Eleanor said quietly. "Walk away now with $1 million, no strings attached. Or you can try to become the man I believe you can be." Marcus looked at her, this dying woman who'd seen through him from the first moment and somehow decided he was worth saving. The old Marcus would have taken the million and run. But something had changed during these months of care, during the quiet intimacy of watching someone face death with grace. He thought about the life he'd lived, the emptiness of it, the hollow victories. "I'll try," he heard himself say. "I'll try to be that person." Eleanor's smile was radiant despite her weakness. "I know you will." Patricia looked skeptical, but said nothing, gathering the signed documents. Eleanor died 3 weeks later on a quiet Tuesday morning with early light streaming through the penthouse windows. Marcus was beside her, holding her hand as her breathing gradually slowed and stopped. In the end, she seemed to simply let go, peacefully departing the world she'd navigated with such intelligence and grace. Marcus sat with her body for a long time, tears streaming down his face, genuine tears for a woman who'd been more real to him than anyone in his manufactured life. The funeral was small, but dignified. Marcus delivered a eulogy that surprised everyone, including himself, with its raw honesty. He didn't claim they'd had a fairy tale romance. Instead, he spoke about Eleanor's wisdom, her unexpected kindness to a man who'd planned to betray her, her final gift of believing he could change. Patricia Chen approached him afterward, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. "She left you something else," Patricia said, handing him a sealed letter. Marcus waited until he was alone in the silent penthouse to open it. Eleanor's elegant handwriting filled 2 pages. She explained that she'd known exactly what he was from their first meeting, that she'd married him not despite his intentions, but because of them. She'd seen in him someone lost, someone who'd never known unconditional acceptance, someone who needed to be saved from himself. "I'm giving you something no one ever gave you, Marcus," she wrote. "A chance to choose who you want to be. Not what circumstances made you, but who you decide to become. The money is a tool. Use it to build the life you were always capable of living but never believed you deserved." The first year was harder than Marcus imagined. The temptation to revert to old patterns was constant. $50,000 a month was generous, but accessing the real money required work, genuine, meaningful work. Patricia monitored everything, and the trust conditions were ironclad. Marcus enrolled in actual architecture courses, the profession he'd pretended to pursue. To his surprise, he discovered he had real aptitude for it. The creativity required, the problem-solving, engaged parts of his mind that grifting never had. He started small, volunteering with a non-profit that designed affordable housing. The work was unglamorous and occasionally frustrating, but it was real. He was building actual things, helping actual people. His first project was a community center in an underserved neighborhood. Seeing it completed, watching kids play in the space he'd helped create, Marcus felt something he'd never experienced: pride untainted by shame. Eleanor's friends, initially cool toward him, gradually warmed as they saw his genuine efforts. One, an elderly gentleman named Thomas, became an unexpected mentor, sharing stories about Eleanor and Richard's philanthropic work. Marcus learned that Eleanor had been passionate about education access, housing equity, second chances. She'd built her fortune but never forgotten where she came from. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Marcus began to change. The charm he'd weaponized became genuine warmth. The attention he'd faked became real interest in others. The life he'd performed became the life he lived. Eleanor had been right about him, had seen potential he'd never acknowledged. 5 years passed. Marcus stood in Patricia Chen's office, waiting for the final evaluation. He'd met every condition of the trust, exceeded many. The architecture firm he'd founded employed 15 people and specialized in sustainable, community-focused design. He'd endowed a scholarship in Eleanor's name, funded 3 housing developments, mentored countless young people trying to find their way. The $50,000 monthly had been enough. He'd never touched the principal, had actually added to it with his firm's profits. Patricia reviewed the documents with her characteristic thoroughness, then looked up at Marcus with an expression he'd never seen: approval, maybe even pride. "You've fulfilled every requirement," she said. "The estate is now yours, unrestricted." Marcus nodded, then slid a document across her desk. "I want to establish the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation," he said. $30 million for education, housing, and second chance programs. I'll keep 10 for the business and personal needs." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "You're sure? You've earned the right to all of it." Marcus thought about the man who'd walked into that coffee shop 6 years ago, empty inside, chasing money that would never fill the void. That man was gone. Eleanor had known exactly what she was doing. "I'm sure," Marcus said. "She gave me something worth more than $40 million. She gave me a life worth living." Later, standing in front of Eleanor's grave with fresh flowers, Marcus spoke to her as he did every week. He told her about the foundation, about the projects planned, about the person he'd become. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and Marcus imagined it was her approval, her knowing smile, her final victory in a gamble that had saved them both.